Like, it's so weird that this camera gets both, and this one right here, and only gets one. I wonder if everything will happen. I wonder if I should put it up with it or change it. Well, I guess it's fine like that. You can see this if you can turn your phone. You can't turn your phone while recording. Oh, oh, you're old. You laugh. That's cool. That I wonder if you'll be able to see like the comments up there. You should be. Yeah. Thanks. All right. Well, I don't know if anybody's watching. Probably not. I don't like it. Yeah, it doesn't look like anybody's. Doesn't look like anybody's watching. But that's totally fine. So I guess people will just pour in as they pour in. So this conversation that I wanted to have is very, 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 very important to me. Um, it's important to me for a lot of reasons, but mostly because it affects both Ben and I directly to a degree. Um, so there's two things I really want to talk about. One is the importance of voting, particularly in the Black community, and then the other is kind of my reaction to the Breonna Taylor case and like what that meant as a whole, in my opinion, for our community, the Black community specifically. So hopefully you guys can hear me okay. I know we're doing it on YouTube and on Facebook Live right now. For those of you watching on YouTube, if for some reason you can't hear or something, just let us know and I'll see if I can fix it. But I'm sure Facebook Lives doesn't have a problem right now because they're a lot more efficient with live streaming. But anyways, so first up for me, like I said, it is the importance of voting. So Ben and I were having a conversation the other day about voting and why it was so important. And um, I got really, really, I guess, triggered is the word. Impassioned, maybe? Impassioned, yeah. Well, however you want to label it. Triggered, impassioned, angry, whatever, upset. About the fact that there are people who I know who are people of color, who are Black, who are not planning to cast their vote in this election. So I really wanted to talk about that and just kind of go over some things that I know about voting and why I feel it's important, particularly in our community. And then also, you know, have your perspective about voting and how you feel about it. So first for me, I'm trying to put my password into Google. What is it? Is that it? Okay. So for me, the first thing I want to talk about is why Black people don't vote. So in our community, a lot of times, I think a lot of people don't feel like their vote matters, because for a lot of people, it's like you lose hope in the system, in our government, in our institutions, and you don't feel like um, voting as a person of color, whether you be Black or Latin or Asian or Middle Eastern or what have you. A lot of us don't feel like our vote matters, like it counts, because when we do vote, we don't really see the results we're hoping to see. Um, at least, on a grand scheme. Um, but I think one of the main things for me that I want people to know about voting, and particularly voting for us, for Black people, is that voting it's not just what you see federally. It's not just the bigger government that you see. What's really important for people in voting and why it matters is at the local and state level. So I think because a lot of people they vote and they feel like they didn't get the president they wanted, they don't realize that there's so much more they're voting on than just that. So, for instance, when you vote at the local level, you're voting for what's going to affect you immediately. Um, and then, of course, when you vote at the state level, that's also what's going to affect you to some degree immediately. And then, the years that follow, depending on what laws and bills are passed and put into place. So even if for some reason in this election you don't want to vote on the president because you don't believe in Joe Biden or Donald Trump, which is totally fine. That's your right not to believe in the people who, are fighting for the presidency. I personally, and I certain Ben personally too, doesn't necessarily want either one of those candidates. They aren't either one of our, particularly our first option or our favorite option.
And I think that's something with politicians is that they're none of them are going to be exactly what we want.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
Yeah.
There's no perfect politician.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, they're politicians and they can't be our personal heroes. Like we have to make very pragmatic decisions and just this is what it is in a very general sense.
Yeah. I think too, like when it comes to like politics, because it's such like a taboo issue, like people don't really want to talk about it in spaces that they don't feel comfortable, which is totally understandable. I try to, as best I can, anyways, avoid talking about politics at work or in places where somebody stands the chance of being uncomfortable, because you don't want to make other people uncomfortable, right? And you certainly don't want to feel uncomfortable. So we talk about politics in places that we feel comfortable. So as I was saying, particularly in the Black community, a lot of times we'll have conversations about that stuff with each other, but we don't discuss it outside of our places of comfort. And then a lot of times that's also another reason why people don't vote, is because they feel like, well, this conversation is not going to prompt any change beyond the person I'm talking to right now. Like I can talk to a person who gets it and feel like I'm getting what I need versus voting and not seeing what I want to see. So yeah, like mistrusting candidates is a big thing. A lost belief in the system was another thing. But what I really want to encourage people to do with voting is not necessarily don't when you vote, if you don't feel comfortable voting for the actual candidate, don't vote the candidate. Vote your conscience. Vote what you feel is going to be right for everybody. Like I think a lot of times people don't vote because they're like, well, I don't want to vote for the people who, are running. But it's like you need to vote for those people's policies. Those people's policies are what matter. Like I don't care for Joe Biden. I'm not pro Joe Biden. I'm not a huge Joe Biden fan. I'm never gonna be. He's not who I feel represents me as a person or my beliefs, in totality to a degree. But what I do agree with that Joe Biden will be doing is who he's going to put in the Supreme Court positions when they're available, what laws he's going to sign when they make it to his desk, what bills, excuse me, rather, what ideas he's running on, and people in his party can push him, the things they can push him to do that he's willing to listen to hear, to really entertain, I guess, in thought is what I'm saying. So I'm not voting for Joe Biden. I have no intention to vote for Joe Biden. I am voting on the issues. I am voting morally. I am voting ethically. I am voting in my best interest. And that means voting for Joe Biden, unfortunately. That's not something that I say proudly because I know a lot of people don't like Joe Biden, and that's perfectly fine. He's a career politician. I'm not a big fan of Joe Biden either. Um, but I'm not voting for him. Like I said, I'm voting for many other reasons. Um, and so I just want to make sure that people who decide that they are not voting because of specifically Joe Biden don't hinder themselves from voting at all. And if worse comes to worse and you are voting and you don't want to vote for Joe Biden or Donald Trump, write somebody into that part and then vote your state and vote your local. Like that's what's important to affect you immediately. So at least, even if you don't want to vote for the president of the United States, vote for your governor and your senator and your state representatives, people who are going to make the laws in your state and sign the bills in your state.
People who are going to talk about your kids' education
Yes.
and the roads you drive on and the
Yes.
stores you have access to.
Yes, because right now, as we all know, Mitch McConnell is who represents us, unfortunately. He's who represents us.
And he has been serving longer than either of us have been alive.
30-some years.
Yeah. 37,
30,
I think.
36, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably not an odd number since it's an election year, but
it's a long time. It's a long time.
I mean,
it's longer than I think any of my mother's children have been alive. And that's saying something. Because there's a lot of us. Yeah. And we've all grown up over different time periods. And Mitch McConnell has been the senator the entire time. And he's such a problem, and he's so corrupt, and he's so greedy, and he's so evil. And so that's another reason why I want to really encourage people who aren't thinking about voting to vote. At least if for nothing else, to vote Mitch McConnell's ass out. He's got to go. Like, the man had bills sitting on his desk for almost a full year that he's never even looked at. He's never even thought about signing. But the minute a Supreme Court, vacancy showed up, he's like, "Oh yeah, we're going to vote on it. We're doing that immediately." But what about all the other bills? He didn't even entertain one of the stimulus bills that was sent to his desk. That's still sitting on his desk, and this is like what 170 some odd days it's been sitting on his desk. Like,
and I will say, I am disappointed as hell that I have to go into that ballot box and vote for Amy McGrath. Who's running a lazy and shitty campaign just because she has a bunch of DNC dollars. Because I was excited to vote for Charles Booker.
I would have been
when I got that ballot, and I was thrilled because this is a candidate that believes what I believe in very closely, and who was running a very grassroots, like in the weeds with the people campaign, someone I could believe is with us and for us and about us. And so knowing that I have to go vote for Amy McGrath, who doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell at beating Mitch McConnell, but I'm going to vote for her anyway because I'm going to do what I can do.
Unfortunately, I'll be voting for Amy McGrath too. Not because I like her. It's because she's the lesser of two evils. And let me make clear too, for a lot of, like I said, getting back to Black people and why we don't vote, and some of the reasons why we say we don't vote. Black people, unfortunately, in this country are more often than not going to always be voting for the lesser of two evils. We're always going to be voting for the person who is willing to tolerate us. It sounds awful. It is awful. I wish that wasn't the case. I wish that we were valued, and our ideas and our thoughts and beliefs were valued just the same. But to anybody who has skin like mine in this country, we know that's not the case. And that's okay, because that's what government is for. Government is for us to try our hardest to put people in positions that are going to listen to us and that are going to hear us, So just because you feel like, just because you're a Black person, you might feel like, why am I voting? Nobody cares about me. Do it because it's something that our ancestors fought for us to be able to do. There were people who fought with everything they had to have the right to vote who were black. You know, this is not something that we as black people, people of color, should take lightly. Slaves hung from trees, hoping that they would get the right to have their voices heard. Because in this country, your voice is your vote is your voice. You know that's how you that's how you tell people what you think and how you feel and what you believe and how you want them to treat you in this country. Your vote is that. That's what your vote is. So to people who feel like them voting doesn't make a difference, it does. Because that's one more voice that says, hey, I don't want you to cut funding for schools in lower income areas. I want you to put more money into schools in lower income areas. I want my kids to have a good education. I don't want them to not get a great education just because they live in a certain part of town, you know? And if you don't make your voice heard and you don't let, the people who you are putting into the offices that are going to affect you directly know that, then they're just going to always make decisions against you because they don't have a fear of losing their position in office because they know you're not going to vote. Oh, well, those black people in the West End, they ain't gonna vote. So I don't give a damn what it is they want. I'll just do whatever I want. Whatever is gonna make me the most money, whatever is gonna keep me in office, because I'm not worried about them. They're not gonna vote anyways. You know, it's a it's a slap in the face to every single ancestor who ran for freedom, who fought in the civil rights era during Reconstruction, just to have the right to have laws passed, civil rights laws, voting bill passed, just so they could vote. And then we today squander it. We don't even take it seriously. Well, oh, I ain't voting because I don't want to vote. Like that to me, as a black person, hearing other black people say that they're just not voting just because, or because they don't like Joe Biden or Donald Trump, it's so much bigger than Joe Biden and Donald Trump. It it is the next 50 to 60 to 70 to 80 years that voting in this election is going to affect. If we as black people don't vote in this election and Donald Trump somehow becomes president again, it will be our own faults if we suffer at the hands of our government because we didn't take place in the voting process. It will be our own faults. We won't have anybody to blame but ourselves. And I don't want us to have a repeat 4 years of the last 4 years. For one, racial tensions in this country are at an all-time high. We're damn near in the civil rights era again, all because of this president, because of how he reacts to things and his lack of empathy and his lack of uh, emotional capacity to be able to hear people and understand and treat them with some degree of respect. So we can't leave this man an opportunity to have any space left to become our president again because he does not represent us. And not just black people. Donald Trump doesn't represent anybody. Donald Trump doesn't
elite people.
nobody. He represents
1% of the
himself.
country.
Himself. He is
Him and Betsy DeVos.
yes,
And
he is his biggest supporter. He don't care about people. He has no intent to do right by people. What he does is he panders to people who are hateful.
Yep.
He panders to people who want to see division. He panders to people who want to have the opportunity to live out their deepest desires of hatred on others. That's what Donald Trump does. Donald Trump does not really care about those people. Donald Trump cares about Donald Trump. For him, the presidency is a TV show. He cares about ratings. He cares about what people are saying about him on Twitter. He cares about how people are seeing him across the world as far as world leaders.
Well,
but he doesn't care about us.
Well, I mean, clearly he doesn't care about world leaders either because they all.
Well, he cares about dictators.
Yeah, he cares about Putin and the guy in North Korea wants to.
That's Xi Jinping?
No, Xi Jinping is China.
That's Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
And the second, right?
Yeah, yeah, I think so.
Because his dad was the first.
Yeah,
he's dead.
I thought that was Kim Jong Il, and then Un is. Yeah,
I don't live in Korea. I just know they dictators.
Yeah, Putin and like Nancy Pelosi said, all roads lead to Putin.
But
even though I don't like her either.
So for those of you on YouTube, I know usually we don't get this political. Sorry, people on Facebook. We're also live streaming to YouTube, our YouTube channel. So for those of you on YouTube, I know that we don't usually get this political. We try to stay away from that as much as possible because we want to be uplifting and we want to put out love and positivity and bring light to your day. But unfortunately, we are so close to the election.
And we are also, a gay channel.
Yes.
And this election directly, know.
That's what I want a lot of people to understand too. I'm sorry to mean to cut you off. I'm gonna let you finish your thought. For a lot of people who are Black who are saying they're not going to vote too, the level of impact that is going to have on me as a gay Black male in America is going to be tremendous. You being someone who considers themselves my friend or my family or whoever, saying to me or me seeing that your response to voting is I'm not doing it. That's you telling me that, hey, I understand that life for you in America is hard as a gay Black man, but I'm still not voting. And whatever happens to you in the next 40 to 50 years because I chose not to vote is your problem. It's just that simple. It's just that simple. If you don't vote because you don't want to vote for yourself, vote for everybody else. Vote for your children. Vote for your family. Vote for people that this is going to affect. Vote for your grandparents. Vote for your mom, your dad, people who need health care that is going to be stripped away if we get another Supreme Court justice that is conservative. Healthcare, as we know it, will be stripped away. Those people with pre-existing conditions, a lot of them are probably going to die. That's just the reality. And that's another reason why I had to come on here and speak my piece about this, because there's so much at stake in this election that you cannot sit out. You have a moral obligation to vote. If you don't ever vote again in your life, which I'll be mad at you if you don't, but if you don't ever vote again in your life, if you give me just one pass for me to ask you to vote, and I get to pick any election for you to do it, do this one for me. This is the one I want you to do. And if you never do it again, whatever. But vote in this election. It matters. Even if you are only going to vote on a local and state level. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your point.
No, go ahead. I lost it.
I'm sorry. I had to get that. So I want to be honest with you guys because I think that's important. I did not vote in 2016. I'm just going to let that sink in for a minute. I did not vote in 2016. Hey, little Jared. Thanks for joining us on our live YouTube. But I did not vote in 2016. And that is haunting me to this day. Every time I think about the last 4 years and what has happened, even up until now with us being under the fist of coronavirus that is wiping people out, I live with the fear of knowing that this is potentially my fault. I was one of the people in 2016 who said, well, I'm not voting because I hate Hillary Clinton. I don't like her. I don't trust her. She's evil and she's corrupt. And I don't see Donald Trump as even being a president. So I said, I'm not voting. You know, I said, I'm not voting. Now, fast forward to 2020, and that ass is grass. Here we are. And I didn't vote. I didn't vote. And I'm so mad at myself that I didn't vote. And to those of you who are commenting on YouTube, we can't quite see it all the way because I got my phone kind of like in the way. But we'll be sure to respond to you once we're done. But yes, they are all crooked. They are all crooked. All politicians are crooked. Absolutely. I agree with you 100%. But we cannot let that be the reason why we don't cast our vote, especially as gay people in this election. Because if Donald Trump becomes president for another 4 years and he has a stacked Supreme Court like he plans to do, they will overturn every single decision that has been passed to support gay people and to see to it that gay people have equal rights in this country. They will make sure they overturn every decision that they can overturn. So we have to vote. We have to. We don't have the, especially as gay people, but even more so as gay Black people, we have to vote. So another thing that I want to address, I keep putting my password in your phone. Another thing that I want to address about voting is for people who feel like their vote don't matter. So I did a little bit of research just because I wanted you all to understand how much your vote matters. So for people who don't think their vote matters, this is how important you voting is. So Barack Obama in 2008 had one of the highest voter turnouts in the history of the United States. There was more Black people voting in 2008 for Barack Obama than there had ever been Black people voting in the United States country history as a whole in its entirety. We had never voted as much as we voted in 2008 for Barack Obama. We had never put that much energy into voting until 2008. And with our vote, Barack Obama became the first Black president of the United States of America. That's big. That's huge, right? That's super important. That's an incredible accomplishment. The problem was that we all voted in 2008. And then in 2010, when midterm elections came, none of us voted, or little to none of us. That large portion of Black people that voted in 2008, that voted for the president in 2010, that large group of people was chopped almost in half. And we didn't vote in midterm elections. So what happened was, because we didn't vote for people to support the president that we voted in 2008, in 2010, Congress was changed. In 2010, the majority Democratic Congress shifted and more Republicans got seats. And so from 2008 to 2010, Barack Obama had a Congress that was willing to work with him. He had enough people to get things done. And he attempted to get everything done that he could in that short period of time. But after 2010, when Congress changed, because we didn't take our asses out and vote in midterm elections, then he had a Republican opposition that didn't allow room for him to get things done. And he had to fight tooth and nail to get everything done that it was that he wanted to accomplish. And then we, the people, blamed him for not getting things done when it was our fault that he couldn't get things done. So that's why it's so important to vote. That's literally why I'm saying what I'm saying. Because if we vote in record numbers in 2020 and we put a Democrat or whoever in the office that's not Donald Trump, and then in midterm elections, we don't vote again, then whoever that president is going to have hell trying to get anything done. And then we, the people, are going to complain again because we're going to say, well, they're not doing anything, not doing their job. This is why I don't vote. You have to vote in every single election. Every single election. You cannot miss your vote in any election at all, period. Because the moment you sit out in one of those elections, then your party is going to pay the price. People are going to lose seats. Votes aren't going to get put in to help pass the things that we need done. And then we're sitting right back here to square one with a bunch of shit that we want done that can't get done because we didn't vote. So we got to vote in every single election. You can't sit out in any of them. They're all important, every last one of them. So just a brief history lesson, because I'm definitely not a history major and I'm not a history teacher. Hey, Miss Chancellor. She's a history teacher, and she's an amazing history teacher, and it's because of her that I know as much as I know. My hat is off to you. I can't even thank you enough for all that you do, and all the people that you've taught and the lives you influence. My hat's off to you. But just a brief history lesson for you guys that aren't quite sure exactly how our vote matters. So the United States has a Congress, as we all know, and that Congress is broken into two parts. That's the United States House of Representatives and the Senate. So the Senate is the higher portion of Congress, and the United States House of Representatives, thank you, is the lower portion of Congress. So that's why the Senate has so much more power, it would seem.
There's 6-year terms in the Senate, and that's where you have Chuck Schumer, Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, Kamala Harris, Cory Booker.
Basically, unfortunately, I hate to say it this way, all the people you see on TV.
Yeah,
most of the politicians you see on TV are in the Senate.
Unless you think about the House of Representatives, because those are 2-year terms, and that's where you have Nancy Pelosi, AOC, Ayanna Pressley, Ilhan Omar, and also Jim Jordan.
Trash.
Yeah. So that is more easily changed and influenced because they are shorter terms.
Yes.
So when you get into the Senate races, it's much harder to beat someone that already has a seat. So like the Mitch McConnells, the Chuck Schumers, and the Lindsey Grahams, challenging those people is very, very hard.
Yes.
So once you are in it, it is typically unlikely you will get voted out.
Yeah. It's very hard to vote out a senator. It's incredibly tough. I don't know if you all have been keeping an eye on politics the way that we have. Unfortunately, politics has become my life the last year, just simply because of Donald Trump. It is. I always say this to you, and I'm going to say this publicly because it's the truth, as much as I hate to say it. I have one thing to thank Donald Trump for, and it is only because of him that I am now so enthralled in politics. If it was not for Donald Trump becoming president, I probably would have continued my lack of interest in who our president is, who our senators are, who our state and local representatives are. I wouldn't care. And I'm not gonna say I wouldn't care. I wouldn't care as much as I do right now.
He is so vocally and blatantly and proudly hateful.
Yes.
That
he's exhausting.
Human rights are now on the front line, whereas usually Republicans would be, but they'd pretend not to be, so it didn't seem like an issue. But now him and Republicans are just have taken off the veil of at least trying to appear to play nice, that it's just so obvious right now, because I mean, human rights have always been an issue in this country for certain people, but it just, I guess, seems more obvious because Donald Trump is just so blatant and proud of it. And so I guess, because when we met, we met briefly after the same month, a couple weeks after the election, and you've never been super political until
he can tell you. He can attest. He can attest. I was so oblivious of politics to a degree at which, if he would have said something to me 3 years ago about Lindsey Graham and Mitch McConnell, I really wouldn't have known who he was talking about. And it's sad because that is the reality for a lot of people of color. And it's not necessarily our fault. I'm not blaming us. I'm not placing the total blame on us, y'all. I'm really not. I promise I'm not. Because I know what deeper issues are at play. I know that in our areas that we grow up, we are not as taught. We are not as informed about why our vote matters and why politics is so influential in our everyday life. We're not always taught that in the areas that we come up in. And if you're lucky, you get a teacher like Miss Chancellor who teaches you and you soak it up and you never forget it. Because as you age, you really start to understand what kind of world we live in and why voting is so important. But just another point I wanted to touch on too, while we're on the issue of voting. Once again, for those of you who really don't believe that your vote holds power and doesn't matter, the 2016 election that Donald Trump won, as we all know, unfortunately, we're still suffering the effects. Yeah, we're still suffering the effects of Donald Trump winning 2016. The 2016 election that Donald Trump won, it was calculated that he only won by an estimate of roughly 80,000 votes. That means, and that was in three states. Thank you. I believe one was New Hampshire. I want to say one was Pennsylvania. I don't remember. I'll have to look up the details later because I can't remember exactly what 3 states it was, but I know it's 3 states for sure. So he only won by a total of 80,000 votes. So that means, and that's less than the population of Louisville, Kentucky. In the grand scheme, let's talk facts. If we're going to talk voting in elections, let's talk facts. If Donald Trump only won in 2016 because there was a difference of 80,000 people voting who could have voted and changed the results of that election, that is less people that live in the inner city area of Louisville, Kentucky. That could have shifted the election. So that is just how important you voting is. That's how much power your vote holds. That's literally me telling 8 people to tell 10 people to tell 10 people to tell 10 people. And so you get what I'm saying. That's huge. That's incredible that a president can win an election with 80,000 votes being missed that could have changed our entire lives for the last 4 years as we know. So that's another reason why your vote is important and it does matter and it does count, because with that vote, you could have been one of the 80,000 people that would have shifted the conversation in the right direction in reference to who our president was. And we wouldn't be sitting in this swamp of racial tension, hatred, anger, sickness, and death if more people had voted in 2016, me included. I'm so sorry to everybody that I didn't vote in 2016.
I will push back a little bit and say, I don't think you should feel guilty for not voting.
Yes, you should. Yes, you should. You should always feel guilty about not voting, and here's why. Because you not voting affects your life directly. Maybe not, as I said earlier, maybe not on the federal level immediately. Maybe not necessarily even on a state level immediately. But on a local level, if you don't vote and stuff starts happening around you in your city that you don't understand and that's upsetting you and you don't feel like you're getting everything out of the people who represent you in your government, it is your fault that you didn't vote. Hold on, I think I have a question. Would you say voting based on platform is more important than pushing a vote for Biden or Trump presidency? That's a good question.
I think you should just vote on, what platform you feel
Well,
serves you the best.
as I said earlier too, though, like yes, you should always vote. You should always vote on what you feel is going to affect you immediately and in the long term if you can. However, as I said with this particular election, if you can't vote for Biden or Trump because you don't trust Biden or Trump, which is totally fine, you are entitled to that. Nobody can force you to trust somebody you don't trust or believe in somebody you don't believe in. That's your right as an American citizen. And I think that's wonderful. I think that's great. But in this election, even if you don't vote for Biden or Trump and you write somebody in the presidential spot, you should still be writing somebody in the presidential spot and then continue to vote down the ticket for your state and your local election because that's what's important to you immediately. So even if for some reason you can't find a place to identify uh, voting for president, you know, for whatever reason, we all have our reasons. I had mine in 2016. You should still vote in your local and state elections. So that's how I feel about that. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, I understand not liking either candidate. Hell, I don't like either candidate. Neither does he. Neither one of us care particularly for either one of the candidates who are running for office.
In my history of voting, I have voted for one, maybe two candidates that I've been super excited about. Otherwise, it's been I'm going to hold my nose and vote for
the lesser of two evils.
And
every time. That's what voting is in America, unfortunately, guys. That's what it is. But as I said before, don't allow that to discourage you from voting, at least in your state and local elections. Because
the good thing, I mean,
no way.
The good thing with state and local elections is that there's no electoral college. So, one vote is one person is one vote, right? So, and even in our state of Kentucky, the governor's election last year, we were able to, by a margin of like 5,000 votes, choose the governor.
If we had not came out in droves to vote for Andy, like we did, Andy only won by 5,000.
It was a very small margin.
That's how important your vote is.
I mean, for state and local,
we would have had Matt Bevin again, and during coronavirus.
And I'm so grateful that we do have our governor. So state and local, I think it's more so the voting, in my opinion.
So Noah asked, would you say straight ballot voting is okay? Because if I like the platform, then I should trust those who have attached themselves to it.
Yeah, I would say, however you choose to vote, that's your right as a citizen. If you want to vote down the ticket R or D, that's totally up to you. And typically they will be attached to that platform.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, I think that's fine to do. Unless there is someone like locally that that you like that happens to fall on the other side of the aisle. But otherwise, I mean, I'd never do straight ticket, but I always end up going and voting Democrat anyway. But that's just
I'd like to know. I like to see the names. And if I can, try to do as much research on who exactly it is that I'm voting for and what exactly it is they believe in, if I can. Um, we don't always have the luxury of doing that because we live in America. We're busy people. We got to work. We got to pay bills. We got to live life.
And I think, I personally think some of that's on purpose. Like, if they don't know who they're voting for,
Oh,
like,
definitely.
to keep us uninformed.
Oh, definitely. Especially here in Kentucky. One thing I want to point out for people who live in Kentucky in particular about voting is that voting really does move the needle. And if more people in Kentucky, especially people of color, have voted, then we might not have had Daniel Cameron to represent or be the top law lawyer in our state. And maybe if we had someone else, it would have been a different circumstance in the Breonna Taylor case. That's unfortunate, but true. That's another reason why voting matters. Why voting in every single election, as I said before, matters.
I remember seeing his name on the ballot in the last one.
I do too, that bastard. Yeah. If you can, do your best to try to know as much as you can about the people on the ticket. But as I said before, we're human, and there's only so much we can do to inform ourselves before it's time to vote. Based on everything else that goes on in our life, we just unfortunately don't always have the time to know everything.
And local elections for state representatives are not very popular. They don't have commercials or campaign strategies that, really, like the presidential election, they're not as accessible. So it's really hard to find out that information, and you have to seek it out and, look at records. But in local elections, I think district attorneys are very important because they are the ones who, determine the law in that area.
Sorry, guys. I know my phone's all rocky as I had to move for a second. Because we got people commenting on YouTube. For breaking shite. So if you're just now joining the conversation, we're still kind of talking about voting right now. But I did also want to discuss the Breonna Taylor case and how I felt about that. But just to put a fine period on the whole aspect of voting, and for those of you who are watching this live as it's happening, if you haven't caught the rest of the conversation when it's over, just go back and watch it. Please, 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 I encourage you to do that because I want you to hear the entire conversation. But what I wanted to say was that as a final period on the sentence of voting, even if you don't vote for yourself, once again, especially those of you who have children, vote for your children. Because in this election, if Donald Trump becomes president again and he gets a loaded Supreme Court, those people are going to make decisions for your children for the next 60 to 70 years. Those people are going to put their beliefs into every decision they make in the Supreme Court. And that is going to affect this country for the next 60 to 70 years. And the sad reality is we've already got so many federal judges who have been appointed by the Trump administration that we cannot afford to have a weak Supreme Court that does not side
with more freedom and more human rights.
Thank you. We can't afford it. We can't afford it because especially minorities will not survive the next 60 to 70 years if those people get to make all the decisions. So even if you don't vote for yourself, vote for your children, vote for your family, your mothers, your fathers, your grandparents, your aunts, your uncles, your cousins. Vote for those people. For those people, especially the kids who can't speak for themselves. Kids are just trying to grow up and make it in this world. I couldn't imagine if I was a kid in the 90s growing up under President Donald Trump. I couldn't imagine what life would be like. I ache, my heart aches for these kids growing up in a country that is this racially polarized and this hateful and this negative and this big giant cloud of energy that just seeps over the country, that just leaves depression in its wake. So vote. That is the major reason for this conversation tonight. I had to do my due diligence um, to come on here and say that. I pray that even if it's in the league, I had no intentions on voting. Um, I pray that this may shift their thought process and get them to at least register to vote and then contemplate and think over it and then vote in November. I'm here in Kentucky, just for those of you who don't know. I've also shared it on my Facebook page. But here in Kentucky, we have until October the 3rd to register. So if you have not registered in Kentucky, do not fret. You still have time to register to vote. You can do it all the way up until October the 3rd. So
That's actually coming up because we're October 25th today.
September.
Or September. I wish it was late October.
But yeah, so moving on. Because I want to try not to make this video too lengthy on YouTube. Sorry, YouTube.
We're almost an hour.
It's gonna be kind of long, but we owed y'all video anyways, so consider this us paying that debt. We're sorry. We've been slacking,
Dealing with
life been happening. Then we went on vacation. We ain't gonna go. So I ain't gonna give y'all no excuses. We sorry, y'all. But moving on, I wanted to talk about the Breonna Taylor decision because I know that this, for a lot of people, is going to be the driving force in why they feel like voting is not important and why they feel like voting doesn't matter. So we all know what happened with the Breonna Taylor case by now. We all know what it was, the whole nine. The day that the verdict came out on what they were going to be doing and how they were going to go about addressing, handling the remainder, I guess, of what's going on in the case. I was at work, and we were all kind of at work, just like waiting to see what was going to happen. And then I got back up front and looked it up to see what it was, and it shot through me like a bullet. It was pretty bad. To wait, was it almost 7 months just to get an answer that was the biggest slap in the face that another black man could give you. It, man, I'm good. Man, it was rough. I think it was rough, obviously rough for the entire country. I mean, people are here in Kentucky. For those of you who don't live here, people are here in Kentucky protesting as we speak. They are going to continue protesting. I don't see an end in sight for the protest. I really, really don't. And so here we are, you know. But in reference to the Breonna Taylor decision, it was rough. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about it. For those of you, particularly people who are not black and not of color, I know for some of you, you can't wrap your mind around why people who are black and people of color, why they are so angry by this decision, why they are so mad at this decision. Oh, yeah, you can join, Malcolm. Give me 1 second. I want to go through a little bit more of this, and then I'll let you join. Um, that's not for you guys on YouTube. That's on my Facebook Live. Um, so the reason why a lot of Black people are so upset right now with the Breonna Taylor decision is because it's not just the Breonna Taylor decision that Black people are experiencing. Um, it is the continual environment, especially here in Kentucky, of racism, systemic, silent, stealth racism that we experience every day. And for those of you who don't really understand what racism is for Black people, it is so much more than somebody saying the N word to us or to our face or even behind our back. Racism for us is going to a job that has hair standards of how you can wear your hair. And because you have locks or because you have natural curls like mine, it doesn't fit in the description of what is okay or what is considered professional at the job. It is so much more than just being called the N word to your face. Racism is people making comments to you that they don't even know are racist. It's the everyday cuts, the everyday small paper cuts on your skin of the comments that people make. It's people telling you you don't sound Black. It's people telling you um, you don't behave like a Black person. It's people telling you that you're not Black who aren't Black. It's all of that. It's so much more than just the N word and the traditional thought of racism. It's so much more. It's knowing that your great grandmother experienced racism. It's knowing that your grandmother more than likely experienced racism. My mom was born in 1969. 1969 was the year that we got most of the civil rights signed. 1968, 1969 was the year that we got most of the civil rights laws passed. My mom was born the year that happened. So it's not just as simple as people see it. It is hearing those stories from your family, from your elders, your ancestors, and then having to go out to the world knowing that that's what you're going to still encounter 50, 60 years later, that it's still going on, except for now you have to question if it's even happening because people do it so well and so quietly that you're not sure if it's even what you think it is. So that's why Black people are upset with the Breonna Taylor decision. That's why Black people are burning shit down and Black people are destroying buildings. Now, I'm not saying that I condone that. I'm not. I am the biggest proprietor of protesting peacefully. I think it's wonderful. I think it's great. I think it's one of our few American um, rights that we have that's great. Um, but that's not to say that I don't understand or I can't identify with people who are angry and who feel like the only way to express that anger is to destroy things. And people telling people telling us that we should do things peacefully but are not Black and have not had the experience of being Black in this country really need to do some self-education and self-evaluation, because you cannot try to tell a Black person how they should react to everyday slights of racism that boil over. You don't have the right. You don't have the right. The only thing you can do is say, well, damn, how can I help you? How can I make it better? What can I do to facilitate an environment that makes you feel comfortable with all that you have going on and that you're dealing with? That's all we ask. We don't ask for anything special. We just ask to be treated normal, to not be followed around a store, you know, to not have people look at us weird when we apply at jobs or look us over because of our name on a job application. I don't think that's a lot to ask, you know. I also think that too, when it comes to racism, and I'm going to move on after this, but I just want to make sure I clarify this. It is the responsibility of people who are not of color, people who are not black, who are not Latino, who are not Asian, who are not indigenous, people who are white. That's pretty much, if you're not of color, you're pretty much white. That's what you are. And that's okay. I don't have a problem with that, obviously. Um, but it is your responsibility to do your own research, to investigate, to teach yourself about the history of this country, and to, as the Black church community would like to say, govern yourself accordingly. It is your responsibility to know what not to say to Black people. It is your responsibility to know what statements not to make when you're at work, when you're in the grocery store, when you're even when you're hanging out with your Black friends. It's your responsibility to know what not to say. Nobody is responsible for teaching you that but yourself. You don't understand that? That's not my problem. That's yours. So, um, in reference to the Breonna Taylor decision, in my opinion, I feel like the investigation was riddled with inconsistencies. Um, I feel like there was a lot more that could have been done that wasn't done. I feel like Daniel Cameron put little to no energy into the investigation and really didn't care about what the outcome was. That's just the truth. Um, we all know the search warrant was obtained strangely. The facts surrounding, whether they know for sure that she had anything to actually do with the dealing of drugs, or whether she had them at her house, or et cetera, et cetera. We all know that all that stuff was fickle. We know the judge signed the warrant, not really reading it for real, even though she claimed she did. There's a lot of things that happened that just weren't right. And especially as far as like when they executed the search warrant, they did it in the middle of the night. I don't know why on earth you would go to an apartment complex in the middle of the night, banging on anybody's door, expecting them not to be asleep and expecting them to just know, that you're police coming here to execute a search warrant. That's beyond me. Um, And the fact that the police officers didn't have on body cams, but we saw pictures of them with body cams on, it's just kind of like there's so much that's coming out about the case now that it just really like making me feel some type of way about the decision. It just, in my brain, it just can't be justified. And probably a lot of that has to do with me being me being angry. But a lot of that too is just because it doesn't sound like he cared, you know? Uh, But there's another thing I want to say. I don't personally, I mean, a lot of you know that um, I was the EMT for Louisville Metro EMS. Um, I had the experience of being able to do that job. And I just want to say, from a personal standpoint, the Louisville Metro EMS does not feel like the most welcoming place for Black people. I'm just going to keep it real. From my own lived experience, there are Black people that work in Louisville Metro EMS. Um, they are great people. I've had a lot of interesting conversations. There are a lot of white people who work in Louisville Metro EMS that I think are great people. And I've had great conversations and they've taught me a lot. But that's not to say that just because that is the case, that and me feeling uncomfortable working in that environment can't happen at the same time, because it can, and it did. For those of you who don't know much about Louisville Metro, EMS, police, and fire, I made scenes with a lot of these guys. A lot of them seem to be very good people. They really do. They really do. Surprisingly, I know that's not the narrative we hear a lot, but a lot of them seem to be really good people. The problem is that just because they're good people doesn't mean that they can't have racist thoughts and say racist things and be unknowingly racist or bigoted to some degree. I saw that myself working for EMS. Um, so it's no surprise to me that working for Louisville Metro EMS, Breonna Taylor being um, an EMT who they claim got fired. I don't know the details around her departure from EMS. Um, but it just not surprising to me that a lot of those EMS people have not come up and really spoke out for her. It breaks my heart that they haven't, because I know some of them and I've gotten to know some of them and they seem like really good people. But I think they are just so warped by backing the blue and black, backing the red and the yellow, that they can't come out and just say, well, damn, this was wrong and it sounds shady. And I know some of these police officers, and maybe they're not the best people. Like, why can't you just come out and say that? That doesn't mean that you don't support them in their entirety. That just means that you're being honest. It means that you're speaking the truth. There's nothing wrong with that. But it really made me sad that a lot of EMTs didn't come out and say anything about it. And then not only that, but said things to the contrary. I unfriended a lot of people from EMS. A lot of people from EMS. Um, I wish I didn't have to. But anyways, so I just want to go through a few more things and then I'm done on my soapbox or whatever. Um, with that case in particular, Breonna Taylor's case, I feel like they could have at least made charges and let the jury decide what the outcome would be. Um, because just because somebody's charged with something doesn't mean that they're going to be found guilty of it. I think that the investigation could have been a lot more thorough. And I think that had it been a lot more thorough, there probably would have been more than an indictment of wanton endangerment to shooting plaster off a wall rather than shooting bullets into a body. Um, but I think what we need to take into account too, in regards to Daniel Cameron, the lawyer in charge, was that he was Mitch McConnell's attorney at one point. So it's no shock that him and Donald Trump were close and that he spoke at the Republican National Convention, because, in all honesty, he doesn't care about black people for real. He never cared about Breonna Taylor. When he first heard about the case, he probably was like, oh, I got to deal with this bullshit. He don't care. He's interested in living in a world that doesn't accept him. And that's just the truth. But I think it's important that we have these conversations. I think it's important that we have these conversations in spaces of color and spaces that are not of color. I encourage each and every one of you to reach out to people. If you are a person of color, I encourage you to, if you feel comfortable, to reach out to people when they make comments or say things that aren't right, to explain to them what it's like being you in your shoes in this country. Because sometimes, unfortunately, we make comments about things that we have no experience in, and we think they're right just because nobody's ever challenged them. Because everybody we hang around or everybody whose circles we are in thinks that it's okay. So I challenge you to do that. Again, I want to encourage you guys to vote. Hopefully, I have sparked someone's interest in voting. Lord, I hope I have. Thank you for joining me in this conversation.
Thank you for sharing your opinions, and I appreciate your candor and your willingness to explain. I mean, you've explained these to me privately.
We had these
for
private
years,
conversations.
for a long time, but I thank you for continually educating me. And it's not your job, and I try to educate myself as well.
I think you do pretty good about it.
Because we're together, but I don't ever want to feel like I am entitled to ask you a question about your blackness.
Yeah. I know.
Because I'm not.
No.
And I appreciate your willingness to share with me.
So for those of you on YouTube, as always, stay greasy and not cheesy. And we'll see you in our next video. For those of you on Facebook, hi Tina. For those of you on Facebook, we're gonna keep going. I'm gonna let Malcolm join us and talk to him a little bit.
I'll see if there's any comments there.
Yeah, if you want to check YouTube and respond to our YouTube.
Hold on. Might be the only one here, but we laugh. Same here. I wasn't able to vote. Then I was in the middle of the room. Hey, Malcolm.
Hey.
Hey. And end this.